Angel White Wolf, The Dark Enlightened One, Chapter 2. Let's see. Let's get things clear. An enlightened one is a perfect being, or nearly perfect, a spiritual being who is simply having a physical experience. Exactly. It's very clear to you. Then, an enlightened one can't be sarcastic. He can't have a hell of a temper, or be cruel or sadistic. He can't have vices. He can't be lustful. He can't make fun of people. He can't criticize. Those are far from being characteristics of someone perfect. Right. An enlightened one doesn't go to the bathroom either. He doesn't need deodorant because his armpits sweat perfume. He has no genitals, or if he has, he doesn't use them, ever. Or if he uses them, he ejaculates diamond dust, and only after becoming sexually aroused by performing good deeds and reading sacred texts. You may not be enlightened, but I'm beginning to like you. That's a relief. Now, let me tell you, there's something an enlightened one can't be. Limited. You cannot restrict someone who is enlightened. Pay close attention to this. Enlightenment is not becoming someone with different traits than yours. It's understanding your own traits and accepting them as perfect. How? Almost nobody, and surely nobody I know, knows consciously what that thing we call enlightenment is. However, at a deep level they understand perfectly what it is, and that's why they call it that. Huh? Imagine you are in a dark room. There are many things you can't see, but the fact that there is no light doesn't mean they aren't there. Suddenly, you find the light switch. You turn on the light and the room becomes enlightened. So now you can see everything that's in the room. The same thing happens with people. If a person's soul, his deep consciousness, his interior Christ, his essence, blah blah blah, was a room, then we could say he has the light off. And that's why he can't see what's there. But not because of the fact that he can't see does it mean it's not there. Everyone, absolutely all human beings have in their interior treasures comparable to, but not identical to, those that beings like Jesus and the Buddha had. And the difference between all of those unenlightened ones and beings like Jesus and Buddha is that they found the light switch and so they could see the treasures inside them, right? Something like that, but don't get confused. There is no light switch to find. I thought that finding the switch to be able to turn on the light was precisely the spiritual road. Yeah, that's what everyone thinks. That's what I thought too. And that's why I started looking everywhere unnecessarily. I was feeling around in my interior without knowing what was in there. I obviously took a few knocks, like everyone who is looking for something in an absolutely dark room. And isn't that the way to find the switch so we can become enlightened? No, because the switch doesn't exist. Great. Then it's all a farce. No. It's simply that the switch isn't something that exists, but something you decide. Excellent. You are going to play with my mind like a true enlightened one would. Of course. But I'll do that later. For the time being, I'm speaking very seriously. Enlightenment isn't a question of finding anything. It's simply a decision. Uh-huh, I knew it. I'm enlightened. Hooray! If you only knew that it's really just that simple. And if it is, then why don't I feel enlightened right now? Because you don't believe it. Just that simple. You are being sarcastic when you say you are enlightened, but you are not deciding to be so. And how can I decide to become enlightened? Well, your question is like one from someone blind from birth asking somebody to describe what the color red is like. However, think of this. How do you decide anything? The answer is different for everyone because we are all different. To reach enlightenment, that is, to be able to decide to become enlightened, we only have to know ourselves. What motivates you to make any decision? We are all motivated to obtain something we consider good. Yes, but what motivates you? Be specific. I'll make it easy. You don't want to answer me because you think I'm going to judge you. And yes, this enlightened one does judge, but not you. You're motivated by pleasure, and there is nothing wrong with that. You are a hedonist. Well, we all are. No, that's not true. A lot of people love being miserable. A lot of people think pain is good, purifying and saintly. Many even have the nerve to call hedonism a vice or a sickness. A lot of people love drama. They love guilt. They love being a martyr, or they even are. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just simply that you are not like that. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Okay, I admit you have good information about me. You'd be surprised. However, there are many more things that motivate me besides pleasure. Not if you think about it a little. You are tremendously rebellious. You are motivated by going against someone or breaking a rule, or simply doing something naughty. But in the end, what you're looking for is the pleasure you get by behaving badly. You are an eternal child. You love to play and laugh, but it's the pleasure that you get from being like that that motivates you. You are a person with a strong and orderly mind, very analytical, but it's the pleasure of having things under your control that motivates you. Well, I'm motivated by pleasure, but don't the addicts to drama and suffering obtain pleasure when they go through tragedies? I get your point, but to be considered a hedonist like you must pursue pleasure consciously. Many people don't do that. Too bad for them. Yeah, what assholes. You are the enlightened one. You shouldn't judge. I am an enlightened one, and I can do as I please. I judge if I want to, and I don't feel guilty about it. If it makes someone feel guilty, then he shouldn't judge. But don't get off the subject. You were going to tell me how to decide to become enlightened. Well, then tell me what motivates you. I already did. Pleasure. Yes, but be more specific. Okay. I'm motivated by recognition. I've liked to call attention to myself ever since I can remember. When I was little, I did everything I could to be noticed for the things that others consider good, but I was more than willing to do some of the bad ones to receive my dose of attention. Good. That's what I'm talking about. That's introspection. That's meditation. That's self-contemplation. That is becoming conscious of yourself. And what is it doing for me? A lot. Because your biggest pleasure is what you get by being recognized. What type of recognition are you looking for? It can be almost anything that flatters me. What kind of recognition doesn't flatter you? For example, In my early teens, they laughed at me because I was weird. I hated that. I detest that kind of attention. Okay, then you are not only seeking for attention, you want attention and admiration, right? Exactly. I'm looking for admiration. And if that's so, then why were you trying to call attention to yourself by behaving badly when you were a child sometimes? Well, although I wasn't conscious of this, I did it because people admire villains. I can be the hero of a story, but I also love to be a villain. What I could never be would be a secondary character. Bingo! Then you're motivated by being the protagonist and by being admired, and like the hedonist you are, everything that feels good. That's right. We're progressing. Then, based on this, I can think of any example where you'd need to make a decision. Let's say you have to choose between a strawberry malt and a chocolate one. Which would you choose? The one that sounds best at the moment. Probably the chocolate one. Of course. Physical pleasure is your motivation here. And once you have decided on the chocolate one, what kind of milk would you want your malt made with? Skim milk. Why? Well, because that helps me to keep an attractive body. Of course. Someone can pass on the street and admire your physical beauty, and if the 2,000 malts you have consumed during your life hadn't been made with light milk, then probably that beauty wouldn't be so noticeable. Yes, I suppose you're right. Very good. Now tell me, was it difficult for you to make those choices? No. And why not? Because I knew what I wanted. Because you know yourself enough to know what you want. And when you know what you want, making a decision is easy. Okay now, enlightenment is the same. When you know, you simply realize that deciding to become enlightened is as easy as deciding on whole or skim milk. There's simply not that much to think about. You know what you want. The decision comes naturally. But I know what I want. I want to become enlightened right now. So why don't I? You can want a chocolate malt, but that doesn't mean you'll get it. It's only when you decide that you'll get it that you'll order it or make it. With enlightenment, and with everything else, it's the same. You can want it, but you won't have it until you decide to have it. Ugh, we're going around in circles. Let's get back to my point. How do I decide to become enlightened? That's my point too. Not me or anybody else can tell you how to decide it. Only you can do that. But whatever makes you decide to become enlightened will be different from what has made others do it. Now, if you know what motivates you to make any decision, like choosing the flavor and the type of milk for a malt, then you know how to decide to become enlightened. In my case, my motivation for enlightenment would be obtaining admiration and being the protagonist, and or physical pleasure. Amen.